Brazil. According to official tallies, a convicted criminal and avowed socialist called Lula da Silva beat the incumbent president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, by a narrow margin this weekend. And yet millions of Brazilians, millions, don't believe that's what actually happened. Bolsonaro himself has not conceded. There are protests all over Brazil right now. You're seeing some of them on your screen right now. There are questions about whether all the ballots have been counted, why so many were thrown out, millions, and whether election laws were violated in the process. So we can't render judgment on those questions, but if you care about democracy, if you think the process is essential, then you would look into those allegations. Anything less is not democracy. And yet what's interesting, and maybe a point of concern for the rest of us here in the US, is that you are no longer allowed to ask questions about this election in Brazil. And you're not allowed because the Biden administration doesn't want you to. That's true. YouTube, which has functioned for the last 2 years as an arm of the Biden administration, has announced it is censoring any posts in Brazil that question the election results. Brazil's courts have also rejected any inquiry into the election. In fact, a Supreme Court judge in Brazil has also ordered social media companies to remove any social media post that questions the outcome. Overwhelming censorship in a, quote, democracy, preventing people from asking questions about how the, quote, democracy functions. So why should you care about this? Brazil, it's a long way away. Well, 2 reasons. The first is that the result of this election will determine the extent of China's influence in the Western Hemisphere. If Bolsonaro is determined the loser, and da Silva does become the president of Brazil, that means that left-wing governments loyal to China outside of our sphere of influence will control all of South America. Brazil was the last holdout, also the biggest and most significant country in South America. Bolsonaro alone in South America stood in the way of total Chinese hegemony there. It's our hemisphere. It matters. But the second reason you should be paying attention to this is that the crackdown on free speech in the wake of Brazil's contested election is a result of policies from our country. The Biden administration has been interfering in the elections in Brazil, period. The Biden administration has already announced that Bolsonaro lost and then threatened Bolsonaro with consequences if he tries to contest the result of the election in his country. The State Department, the Biden State Department, put out a statement saying that Bolsonaro's defeat, quote, reinforces trust in democratic institutions. Really? This is an election that is contested. The demonstrations in the street prove that has not been audited, that apparently cannot be audited by fiat, and that you're not allowed to talk about. How does that restore your faith in institutions? No, only one thing restores your faith in institutions, and that's transparency. When people are hiding things, it makes you think maybe they have reason to, of course. And when governments hide things, you can be dead certain they're lying, period. But from an American perspective, the question is, why was the Biden administration interfering in a foreign election? These are defenders of democracy who believe in free and fair elections. They shouldn't be meddling in other people's elections, but they are. A lot. Several years ago, Toria Nuland at the State Department, the woman who's driving our war against Russia, was caught on tape admitting that she had engineered a coup in Ukraine. Was she punished for that? No, she was promoted. Again, she's still at the State Department. So it does make you wonder what we've been doing in Brazil. The Biden administration hated the last president in Brazil for political reasons, ideological reasons, reasons that had nothing to do with what was in America's best interest, but had everything to do with the silly lifestyle liberalism that determines their worldview. So last year, our CIA director, William Burns, traveled to Brazil, and while there warned top officials that Bolsonaro could not contest the election results no matter what. Wait a second. Why would the CIA chief be in Brazil lecturing them about their elections? Isn't that interfering in an election? Oh, yes, it is. Then months after that visit from the head of our CIA, Brazil's Supreme Court ordered the indefinite detention of several Bolsonaro supporters without a trial. What did they do wrong? What was their crime? They, quote, attacked Brazil's institutions in their private communications. They undermined confidence in election integrity, so they had to go to prison. It's shocking. And the most shocking part is not simply that there's corruption in a Latin American country. That's par. The shocking part is that the Biden administration is abetting it and reinforcing it and trying to do the same thing here. We saw a preview of this in the United States after January 6th. What's happening in Brazil now is an escalation. And once again, the Biden administration endorses it, has a hand in it. Within hours of a contested election, people have been banned from talking about it. Street violence is breaking out naturally. So-called election deniers are being killed. Why would you imagine any other outcome? In the absence of transparency, what fills the void? Conspiracy theories. If you want people to believe the truth, tell them the truth. Stop hiding things.